Hello and welcome. We're going to wait just another minute or so, and we'll get started here. So hello and welcome. This is on behalf of Zerto and Envision. I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your day to learn a little bit about Envision and Zerto and what it might mean for your IT environment. My name is Phil Magnuszewski. I am the VP and General Manager for our office up here in Boston.
And my name is Stephen Gray. I'm with Zerto. I'm the Northeast Account Manager.
So just a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded. So if you do miss some of it or want to pass it along to a colleague to take a listen, it will be available on our website later this week. To kind of get things kicked off here. There we go. You know, I like to, before we get into the bits and bytes of the technology and why we think the Zerto solution is something worth considering, I just like to take a step and kind of remind ourselves that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent, but as you see here, the most adaptable organisms that are the ones that went out in the end. And the same applies to and is true for business, right? It's the most adaptable business today. It's the most agile businesses today, especially in today's market, that end up being at the top of their game and the top of their markets. Continue to change at an incredibly fast pace. It's difficult on a good day to keep up with that. And on top of that, you know, how that technology can impact your business in a positive way from a by the name of Netflix, and used a change in business model, leveraged cloud computing technology for streaming videos, and totally kind of flip-flopped that relationship in the market where they became, in essence, the dominant market leader. So it's important for us just to keep in mind that it's, you know, it's easy to get lost in the bits and bytes, but it's more important for us to keep focused on the prize, which is really helping enable our businesses through the use of technology. So for those who aren't familiar with Envision, here's just a little bit about us. So Envision is a business and IT consulting firm that's focused on evolution to the cloud. We began back in 1998 as a networking service provider, and back in the early 2000s really got on board with the whole virtualization movement. We were one of the first virtualization focused companies up here in New England back in the early 2000s, and have kind of remained true to that over the past decade. Running their solution set around that, and I'll talk about that later, all the technologies that would touch that, and then becoming more of a, I'll say, service or consulting-based firm over the past few years as well. Unlike some other providers out there, we have a lot of human capital, and what I mean by that is that the majority of our employees at Envision are engineering focused or involved in the engineering process. So we look at ourselves as kind of an engineering firm working with their clients to understand their businesses, understand where we can leverage technology to make your businesses more efficient, more agile, and applying the right resources to make that happen. And then I just, I like this kudo, this call out here. It's one of the best places to work in Rhode Island for in essence, the past 5 years. Just a great culture, very customer, client focused, and just a great place to work. And if you're a client and have worked with us in the past, I think you'll agree to that as well. So as I mentioned, we started out with virtualization way back in the day. And if you take a look at the different areas that Envision works with our clients in, and I'll kind of start with the virtual data center. So we're providing infrastructure services, infrastructure products for the data center. As the virtual environments in those data centers have changed, right? We did the compute component of that over the past 5 to 6 years. That's really taken off. Networking virtualization is something that people are looking at now, what impact that may play in there. Storage virtualization, how all those pieces are going to fit together once that happens. We're working with clients to help them figure out what that looks like and what a roadmap might look like for their particular organization. We work with clients in terms of desktop and mobility. And we all have heard of a virtual desktop, but it's more than that. It's really building out a virtual workspace where I can access a desktop or applications in a secure manner, while also having access to data on the go as well. So everything from the virtual desktop technology itself to wireless to security, really providing a robust and a holistic approach to that particular silo. Enterprise data. For those who may not know, this is a newer practice area for Envision. And what that really entails is everyone's heard of the whole big data phenomenon. Again, it's one of those buzzwords that's out there. But what that means is we help clients organize disparate data, kind of make better sense of it to make better business decisions. So that's really built on the Microsoft business intelligence and data warehousing platforms. So to give you an example, we'll go in and work with clients to either optimize the SQL environment, remediate that SQL environment, maybe integrate some different data sources into that as well so that, again, they can make better business decisions. And then there's kind of a catch-all silo that we'll work with clients on as well. We call it special projects. And really what that entails is, for some clients it may be, outsourced CTO services, or two organizations may want to merge, or you may want to acquire another organization. We can do the due diligence from a technology perspective to help you make sure that you know what you're getting into and what the cost is going to be to integrate that acquisition over time. And then across all of those, on top of providing the equipment, whether it's software or hardware, we provide a broad range of services that would include an advisory or consulting component, the implementation of that solution, hosting of it, managing it, and then more and more as cloud becomes more relevant and available to a lot of organizations to figure out where pretty much from the get-go in the whole virtual world. So we've seen the massive transformation that's happened to data centers with regards to how that technology has impacted a lot of things, including processes, right? And one of the biggest ones that we've seen is that, as virtual or as data centers have become more virtual, the way we approach disaster recovery has changed, right? The technologies, the models, the processes. For a physical environment, we're replicating, host systems and array-based replication don't necessarily make as much sense anymore in a virtual world. So there are newer technologies that have come along that better address that specific scenario. So we'll get into the kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation on this, but kind of before we do, Steve, what I'd like to ask you is, a lot of folks have talk about backup and disaster recovery, and some folks, I've heard kind of lump those things together. So before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it, how do Zerto make the distinction between backup and DR?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Phil. And first off, thank you to Phil and the Envision team for organizing this and inviting Zerto to participate in the webinar. To answer that question, typically backup is defined as making a copy or multiple copies of data and focusing on granular recovery and compliance, such as maybe recovering a single user's email from, say, 5 years ago. Whereas disaster recovery is the actual act of copying and then moving data between sites, and is measured in RPO, which is recovery point objective, and RTO, recovery time objective. And DR's main focus is resuming business as quickly as possible in the event a disaster strikes, where minimizing the RTO is the key objective. So the bottom line is that disaster recovery is concentrated on ensuring business applications and processes are always available in the event of a disaster.
No, great. And I think that's an important concept to make sure we kind of get out there to level set things. So obviously, I mentioned that there are, things have changed, but, disaster recovery has been around kind of forever. But there have been other technologies that have addressed it. So what makes Zerto unique?
Yeah, great question. So what makes Zerto unique is that it's specifically designed for the virtual layer. As more and more aspects of the data center make the move into the hypervisor, we're still focused on disaster recovery initiatives or solutions that are more focused in the physical. So Zerto is specifically designed for this ecosystem, making the solution 100% virtually aware. And what that allows us to do is fully automate these processes that are around failing over and failing back. The solution is 100% software, so it allows for scalability, whether it be encompassing multiple sites or increasing the number of VMs that are associated with your disaster recovery plan. The solution is focused around addressing the needs of those most mission-critical applications, as well as less mission-critical applications, whether it be allowing for that scalability or providing RPOs and RTOs in very aggressive levels, RPOs in single-digit seconds and RTOs in single-digit minutes. And we'll get into that as we go through the presentation. And Zerto also is unique in the fact that we encompass 100% of the DR strategy, from the orchestration to the replication and the actual recovery. So everything can be managed within that Zerto suite. And as you see at the bottom here, we're industry recognized as the best of breed for this type of replication, Best of VMworld in 2011, as well as back-to-back Products of the Year from TechTarget in 2011 and 2012.
Excellent. See, that's a great starting point. So I think kind of without further ado, we'll kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the technology.
So absolutely. So Zerto is made up of two main components. The first one is the Zerto Virtual Manager. This is a plug-in directly into vCenter, so will appear as a tab within that instance. The ZVM allows you to do your daily checks, pick and choose the VMs you want to replicate, create those virtual protection groups, run reports, receive resource utilization reports as well. And everything is done through that Zerto Virtual Manager. It is the brains of our operation. The second component is the Virtual Replication Appliance, or the VRA. The VRA is the engine of our software. It is 100% software, and it allows for the move of the information across the sites. And the VRA will sit on the ESX and ESXi host, and as you deploy more VRAs out, you're actually increasing the power of Zerto. You'll notice at the bottom that we have multiple vendors in regards to hardware. Zerto is completely agnostic in replicating across these disparate versions of equipment. So if you're utilizing a NetApp array at your primary and then you bring on a secondary site that might run EMC, IBM, you have the ability to replicate across those different versions.
So Steve, I think historically, when we're talking about DR and when you talk about, it's been complicated in a lot of cases historically and expensive, you kind of had to have a like-for-like setup between data centers, between the primary and secondary site. So what you're saying here with this then is, I could theoretically still have my EMC array sitting at my primary site. It might be some, one of their, VNX products, kind of high performance. But on the flip side, what I could do is theoretically then replicate over to a Dell EqualLogic platform on the other side, because you're really focusing on the VM level, right? So kind of driving down the cost of that DR component.
You certainly can. And to take that one step further, we're also agnostic in regards to protocol. So if you have some older arrays that might be iSCSI, NAS, or DAS, you'd be able to repurpose those over to your DR site. That is the second way we're agnostic in regards to protocol. But we're also agnostic in regards to versions of vCenter. So if you're bringing on a second site and it's going to be the latest and greatest version of vCenter, and your primary isn't to that level yet, you're still able to replicate with Zerto because of the ability to be agnostic in that arena. And with the three areas that we're agnostic, which is hardware, protocol, and vCenter version, you're not sacrificing anything from a replication standpoint. You're simply able to deploy this enterprise solution on the infrastructure as it appears today.
Steve, with that, what hypervisors are supported? I mean, can I truly replicate from anything to anything today?
And with the solution being 100% software, not only does it allow for that high scalability, but it also allows for a very simple install and download. Zerto is installed completely over the wire in a matter of 30 to 40 minutes, and you're up and replicating sub 60 minutes. So no longer are those days of long statements of work of getting a disaster recovery plan into place. This can be installed within one business day and begin replicating on the hour. I'll bring the next 2 points up in conjunction because they go hand in hand. We talked about one of the core features of disaster recovery being recovery point objective, or RPO. How much information can we afford to lose before it starts costing the business money? Zerto minimizes this by practicing near sync continuous replication over to a journal you see at the bottom right-hand corner. And that journal allows for continuous data protection. It's not based on snapshots. It's based on that continuous data capture so that we can provide you the most granular RPOs out there. So for example, if something should happen at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, you have the capability to roll back to 3:59 and 58 seconds or 57 seconds and so forth, giving you that very aggressive RPO so that business is not impacted and you can continue processes as normal. Zerto will also provide bandwidth optimization and throttling. So Zerto will compress the data at a rate of 2x to 4x. We also have the ability to throttle. So for example, if you'd like to go into the Zerto Virtual Manager and say, I'd like to give this much bandwidth to Zerto between, say, the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., and then change that amount of bandwidth between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m., you have that ability to do so, and that is automatic. Once you make that schedule, Zerto will adhere to those time parameters.
So Steve, there are going to be a lot of folks out there that between data centers are going to have some kind of WAN acceleration device, like something from Riverbed or Steel, Silver Peak. Is that a relatively simple integration with Zerto, and will it work with something they have in place already?
Great point, Phil. Absolutely. So Zerto will work completely alongside a Riverbed or Silver Peak or any other WAN optimization tool that's in the market. All the end user has to do is go into the Zerto Virtual Manager, disable our bandwidth optimization function, and we'll play right alongside with the tool that they have in place so that they can continue to utilize that investment. So going one step further, and how we're actually not just protecting your data, but how we're actually allowing you to continue these processes if a disaster should strike. And those processes really focus around the applications of the business. And with Zerto being designed for that hypervisor, we have line of sight into all areas of that arena, whether it be the VM or the VMDKs that make up these applications that are virtualized. Zerto allows you to create what's called a virtual protection group, or what we call a VPG for short. And no matter where those VMs or VMDKs reside, we will be able to group these VMs into that similar virtual protection group. Another unique differentiator about Zerto is that we have full support of all the tools that VMware offers. What we've seen in the market is that other replication methods might not allow for this type of integration, where Zerto is automatically going to adhere to the rules that you've set up through these tools. So for example, if you move a VMDK from one data store to the other via storage vMotion, and it's part of a virtual protection group steps associated with that move, Zerto will replicate as long as you tell it to replicate it. We also also are providing that journal point in time. So these applications are all being brought over at that same point. So if a failover should occur, that application is going to come up pure and consistent in that time that you've chosen to do your failover. You can also set multiple policies and configurations with the VPG. Those, for example, are a priority list. So if there is limited bandwidth at the time of replication, you can set a high, medium, or low that ensures your most mission-critical applications are sent over the wire first and then followed suit by medium and low priority applications. You can also set the RPO you want a certain VPG to adhere to. So it can be as granular as down to the second or as less granular all the way up into the hour mark, up into the 12-hour area. This allows you to span Zerto out across the business and not just focus on your most mission-critical applications, but allow you to have other applications that can be allotted this ease of replication, if you will. So you can take your most mission-critical applications and give it that RPO of 1 second, 2 second, and then take a less mission-critical, more stagnant application and provide it that 12-hour mark so that you're not constantly replicating information that doesn't need that robust failover time frame. We also have the ability to set the IP network that you want these VMs to fail over to, which is automatically done when you do a failover. And you can set that VPG to have multiple IPs, whether it be in a test failover. You can set a different IP for a test failover and a separate IP network for a live failover, or they can be one and the same. And then finally, for those Windows applications, you have full integration with VSS, giving you those known good points in time when that application is pure and consistent. And those VSS check marks are actually associated within the journal, and they're easily identified as such next to the timestamp that they're associated with.
Excellent. So Steve, along with kind of some of the things you went through, and going back to the core value of the technology, we just pointed to VMs. So is it safe to assume that in some cases you might experience a positive CapEx impact between bandwidth as well as hardware and resources on the secondary site as a result of the Zerto solution?
Great observation. Absolutely. Almost 100% of the time you'll see a positive impact, especially not just on your CapEx but on your OpEx. From the CapEx side of the house, you'll see a positive impact on the bandwidth utilization. If you notice on the illustration we have on this slide, we're only replicating the number of VMs that you require. We're not replicating entire LUNs that might include additional white space that's not mission critical or important to the business. This allows you to get very strategic and granular on what you are replicating. So with the ability to pick and choose just the VMs you want to replicate, you're reducing the amount of bandwidth required as well as the storage footprint at the secondary site, or the target site if you will. And then on the OpEx side of the house, since we're not focused on LUN-based replication but on VM replication, you're reducing the amount of LUNs, so your operational expenses are reduced in a positive manner. So again, to revisit that point, with our hypervisor design, Zerto has the ability to have all these lines of sight. And again, we have the ability to be completely aware or cognizant of all aspects of that virtual environment. So if we wanted to do a failover, we're able to automate this entire process. You'll notice right now we do not have any VMs spun up at our secondary site. So Zerto is not going to focus on have you focus on managing any ghost or shadow VMs. We're simply waiting for you to press that failover button, and that's when we'll spin those VMs up to continue business as usual. So I'll go ahead and press that button, and when we do, those VMs are spun up and reconfigured from an IP standard or IP aspect automatically. Once those VMs are brought up, the VMs are IP reconfigured automatically, the boot order is taken into consideration, and test networks are created so that businesses can restore business as normal. Our RTO is typically measured around 3.5 to 5 minutes, and it's due to the fact that we're automating this entire process. To ensure that we're continuously meeting the SLAs that a business wants Zerto to adhere to, Zerto has the ability to do non-disruptive testing. So no longer do you have to worry about coming in on the weekend or staying long hours out on a workday. You have the ability to do a non-disruptive test during the workday. And Zerto will not impact any of the applications you're protecting or your production applications, and we will not impact the replication that is ongoing. The test is done completely in the background, away from production, on a test network, and it will appear as if the test is not even taking place. Once that test is done, a report is generated that can be accessed through the Zerto Virtual Manager. And that reporting will give every readout from how long the test took, to what was tested, to what resources were utilized. And that can be generated and presented to any type of external auditor or internal management review. Zerto also gives you the ability to create a clone from our robust journal. And typically the clone is used for test and development, giving the end user the ability to create a point-in-time copy and running any necessary tests that they might require on the applications they're protecting.
So Steve, in this scenario then, the historical backup disaster recovery, architecture might look like where, on the primary site you would have, backup to tape, backup to disk, and then you would have the secondary site would be your DR site. What I'm seeing with this, especially with the cloning functionality now, is that I could architect the solution in a way where the DR site, I am cloning the data sets and the VMs and things over on that side, and then backing up on that side, kind of killing two birds with one stone if I need to have offsite backup, which is a requirement in a lot of industries today.
Absolutely, you could certainly do. A lot of our end users have become very savvy to that point. What you have the ability to do is actually take that clone and present it as a backup to tape or disk and keep that off-site. That way you're not impacting any type of production during the business day. So end users will make a backup at the beginning and end of the day at their production site and then make however many number of clones they feel appropriate, allowing that backup window to shrink down to near zero, and then also having those tape or disk backups already in an off-site location, allowing them to avoid any type of shipping costs or having them to ship to another site. So those backups are already brought over at a secondary site.
Nice.
Some of the enhanced features that we've had in our 3.0 release, which was brought to market back in September of 2013, is enhanced workflow automation and end-user accepted recovery. And this also falls into the reporting areas that we have that are accessed through that Zerto Virtual Manager. So you're able to validate points before a failover takes place. You're able to commit, or rather validate before commit, if you will. And this allows you to commit that But that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Zerto. With the multi-tenancy, Zerto is able to scale out and address all needs of the enterprise replication strategy. Zerto is, and then parsing this out to all the locations that might have an infrastructure footprint. Zerto is designed for that growth. Zerto can also be adopted into a cloud ecosystem where you can have a pure cloud model as well as a hybrid approach where more mission-critical applications are replicated internally and located into the cloud, preserving your more expensive internal disk. But you also have the ability, like I said, with the multi-tenancy, to manage all of this replication through a single portal and allowing you to really achieve simplicity around your enterprise-class disaster recovery.
So that same simplicity that you've kind of gone through initially, it's also going to allow me to do bi-directional replication across multiple sites in a very similar manner?
Absolutely. You can do bi-directional replication between all sites, whether it be one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-one. If you have production running at these multiple arenas, you have the ability to replicate back and forth between those.
That's great. And then on top of that, I think from a use case perspective, it also would make sense if I am an organization that's looking to migrate from a data center, right?
Absolutely. The same Zerto solution that you see here for replication can absolutely be deployed in a migration scenario. So Zerto will actually simplify that process by, say, reducing downtime to minutes, so your extended outages or maintenance windows are not required. Migrations can now take place across different versions of hardware and vCenter. IP reconfiguration, boot order, and other resource-intensive steps are automated, which actually accelerates the time of migration, and productivity and revenue losses can be drastically reduced as applications and data are available more quickly.
Great. That's great.
Another enhanced feature that's part of our 3.0 release is support of single vCenter. Working, to give an example of this, working with an end user that had 2 data centers, one for primary and one for their DR, had 5 remote locations. And all of those 5 remote locations were being managed by that primary vCenter. And they were doing about 5 different backups every night for those locations. Zerto was able to assist them in not just replicating between their primary and their data center and their DR site. You're able to encompass now all of these remote offices so that they can now replicate back to the primary, back up area information from there, and then replicate that over to their DR site. So we're actually able to, with this single vCenter support, have a positive impact in operational expenses around backup as well, and giving you the ability to expand this out across the enterprise no matter what type of vCenter environment you might have. Zerto also allows for management from anywhere. Literally, if you're running a phone, you want to access Zerto over your smartphone, you have the ability to do a failover from that platform. We're also part of the web-based management from vCenter, as well as your most standard vCenter instance through your desktop or laptop. So management from everywhere as far as Zerto is concerned. And then also to build on that reporting, the solution allows for these enhanced reportings, and as I mentioned, they're all accessed through the Zerto Virtual Manager, and they'll keep a history as long as you like, that is set by the end user. And everything is taken into consideration, not just from the resources side of the house, which is an overall site readout, but also from the VMs and the VPGs that those VMs make up. Everything is measured in regards to our reporting. And as I mentioned earlier, these can all be stored so that they can be reviewed later, as well as presented to any type of internal auditor or external management, or external auditor rather, that might require these for any type of compliance around disaster recovery.
So Steve, real quick, to that point, are our customers today using this for, let's say, Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA as part of that process?
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. Obviously, those two pieces of legislation have some very distinct and specific rules around testing disaster recovery to ensure that business and your customer data are always available. These reports are used in that manner to provide pieces of legislation that are out there that define DR scenarios.
Great.
And actually, here's a brief shot of our interface. So as you can see, the Zerto tab directly within that vCenter instance. So this illustrates that tight integration that we have with VMware. To give you a little lay of the land, if you will, we have 7 VMs making up 4 VPGs in New York City that are replicating over to Austin, Texas, that has 1 VM making up 1 VPG. So in the terms of simplicity, you'll see those numbers reflect in the middle between the 2 boxes the number of VPGs or virtual protection groups that we're protecting. On the left, you see New York has that site readout from a site perspective on the number or the resources that we're utilizing. If we were to bring Austin to the forefront of this picture, you would see that same readout on that box as well. You'll see the failover button at the bottom there. Right now we have it toggled on test. So if we were to do a test failover, you'd be able to pick and choose the VPGs that you'd want to fail over, whether it be the entire environment or one particular application. That is up to you. Once you click that test or that failover button, it will give you one more prompt to confirm everything, and you click go. And as that test resumes, you'll be able to follow the test in that progress box you see at the bottom of the screen, as well as see those test VMs being spun up in the tree on the left side of the screen. Once that test is done, those reports are generated, and Zerto will clean up that test as if that test did not even occur. So, and that is an automatic process. So again, in the terms of simplifying DR, specifically around testing, Zerto will automatically clean this up once that test is complete. And Zerto isn't just running scripts during a test and checking the box as we go, saying, yep, we met that requirement. We're actually bringing these applications up in a test manner so that you can actually see them living and breathing and confirming that DR is being met and your RTOs and RPOs are being adhered to.
Steve, I don't know if you can see it on the screen with with the resolution on the WebEx, but there are a couple other buttons on the bottom, the move and the checkpoint buttons. Can you talk about a little bit what those do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So you'll see at the bottom we have 2 buttons in addition to the failover. The first button is the checkpoint. So in addition to automated checkpoints that Zerto will create, manual checkpoints can be inserted as well, giving meaningful logic to a point-in-time image. So for example, if there is an event that is going to take place, such as a firmware upgrade or end-of-quarter reporting, it makes sense to define a point in time prior to that event. So if there are any issues, the system can easily recover to this point when application and data were consistent, i.e., not corrupt. The move button is, simply put, a planned or scheduled failover or migration, where we will shut down the VMs on the source site, so ensuring that there is full sync between source and target sites, and that there's not a potential that during the failover there was a bit of data happening on those source VMs. You'll also notice at the top here we have a VPG list button. That will give me a readout of all the VPGs that are within the New York data center. And once I'm in that VPG list, I can actually break it down by the VMs that are making up that said VPG. And I can get a readout based on that level. Next to the VPG list is the alerts and reporting. Obviously, that's where we'll be able to access our reports, but Zerto will also alert you in regards to any RPOs or RTOs or any other issues that might come up. The alerts can be accessed through this Zerto Virtual Manager. They can also be emailed to you, and you can also access them through your VMware Alerts view. So for example, if you set an RPO for a certain VPG at, say, 3 seconds, and for any reason we're hitting 4 seconds or 5 seconds, maybe it's due to the bandwidth between sites is being corrupted or reduced, Zerto will automatically alert you right away. So that is how granular Zerto can get when it comes to actually alerting you. We can get down to that RPO level saying, hey, we're off by 1 or 2 seconds. Is there something that needs to be diagnosed to ensure that you are consistently meeting these recovery point objectives and the recovery time objectives? One other point I'll make here on this slide is that let's say, for example, that Austin, Texas was taken off the grid for any reason, and we needed to do a failover from Austin over to New York. So Austin is no longer online. Our VRAs, or virtual replication appliances, are going to talk to each other so that they are able to continuously communicate and always make sure that they're both up and running. If for any reason that Austin goes down, our New York data center will say, hey, we're not receiving any more data. Would you like to do the failover? And the administrator in New York can do that failover and bring New York up as the primary instantaneously within those 3.5 to 5 minutes. So the takeaway there is that you do not need the primary data center online to do the failover. So in the true essence of a disaster, Zerto will be able to bring up your business in a matter of minutes and automate that entire process.
That's great, Steve. And I hope that the folks on the webinar today and anyone who listens to this is starting to see why Envision feels that this is just a great advancement in DR technology.
Absolutely. To give you an idea of actually how this is deployed within an actual real-life example, we have 2 end users that utilize Zerto for their replication highlighted here today. First is Woodforest National Bank that is based out of Houston, Texas. They have a primary in Houston and then a DR site based in Austin. And what they were doing and what they continue to do is they fail over every 6 months to avoid from Houston to Austin to avoid hurricane season. So during that time, before Zerto, they were doing a solution around array-based replication. And this failover was taking approximately 3 weeks out of their day, or 3 weeks, I'm sorry, out of their month to actually get this done. So 1 month had to be dedicated just to do this one failover. And it was due to the fact that the IP network had, all the VMs had to be re-IP'd, the carving out of the storage. From every little point, it took about 3 weeks. So 1 whole month out of the year dedicated to just doing this one failover. Zerto came in and reduced that 3-week window down to 3 hours. So now they're able to get this done in the matter of 1 business morning. And the numbers bolded here are directly tied back to that virtual protection group idea. So with the ability to now replicate just the VMs as opposed to the LUNs, you're going to see a reduction in that number of LUNs you're replicating. And since we're replicating just the VMs, you're going to see a positive impact in the bandwidth requirements between sites, as well as that storage footprint at that DR location. And there were 2 arenas that they could now look at. Since they had a very robust or robust infrastructure out at their second location. They can now look at, do we want to put production out there 12 months out of the year? Zerto. They could also look at virtualizing more applications now that they had a true enterprise-class replication solution specifically designed for the hypervisor.
So Steve, I think this is a great example of a growing trend that we're seeing in Envision as well. Not just a pure or true disaster recovery, but in an essence or a situation like this is what we're calling disaster avoidance, right? So we've had a couple of natural events. There's been a hurricane and other storms that have come up the coast in New England in particular over the past few years, and I can see where this is a great opportunity for, so prior to the event actually happening, because it's such a short time window and so relatively easy to make that move, to make that transition before the storm gets here, just in case if something happens to the primary data center.
It's an absolutely great observation. I mean, Superstorm Sandy that hit in 2012 is a perfect example of that, where companies had the ability now to know that that storm was coming and literally within a few minutes fail everything over to their DR site that might be far away from the coast, or specifically outside of New York City, which was impacted the hardest, and ensure that that business is continuing to run, especially if it's a national organization where companies have offices across the country. Yeah, it's a great point. Another specific example is a company called Hapo Community Credit Union. And one of their biggest pain points prior to Zerto was the ability to test their disaster recovery. With Zerto obviously automating this process, it was on the top of the list to be reviewed as bringing in another DR solution. And Zerto was chosen not only due to the fact that it could automate, provide easier testing and non-disruptive testing with that, but also because of that reduction in the CapEx, or that positive impact on the CapEx that they would see with the storage footprint being reduced by, as you can see here, 43%, which is almost half of their storage footprint at their DR site. So they didn't have to worry about bringing on additional storage, because they were going through quite expansive growth over the next few years, and one of the biggest budget line items that they were going to be focused on was large storage purchases, and that budget was very fixed, and they had a lot of other projects that needed to get done but were continuously put on the back burner due to the fact that this budget was dedicated to storage. Zerto was able to free that up so that they could focus on more mission-critical projects that needed to get done, and as well as providing those RPOs and RTOs in a matter of single-digit seconds and RTOs in single-digit minutes.
So, the question I have next is, everyone is talking about cloud computing and the impact that may have, and there's obviously a million different solutions that you're hearing, from in the marketing universe out there, right? So, is this something that's available to cloud service providers that they're starting to pick up?
Yeah, that's another great question, and certainly it is. So Zerto is another unique capability of Zerto. I know I'm using that unique word a lot, but it really fits in with the Zerto solution. What makes Zerto unique is that it's the same solution whether you're going internal replication or a complete cloud solution or a hybrid of the two. Zerto will allow you to achieve all these areas around your data center needs, or your disaster recovery needs, if you will. So for example, if you wanted to start with an internal replication and then start targeting also cloud as a third data center, it allows an end user to have additional replication targets, but not worry about the cost that would be undertook rather, if they had to build a brick and mortar site. So you're actually able to target multiple arenas in the cloud ecosystem to give you these additional sites. You can also do, as we mentioned, a pure cloud model. With over 100 cloud providers to date across the country, Zerto can be offered as a service, giving them the ability to replicate VMs into that cloud arena as well. So Zerto has full integration with vCloud Director and vCAC. It has since its birth, and it has the ability to provide this type of service no matter what the cloud deployment might look like. Even if a company starts with the cloud, and then user starts with the cloud and then might make the move to internal, the solution is all the same software. So it allows you to really carve out the most appropriate disaster recovery strategy for your business.
And Steve, I'll just kind of hammer home the point on that. One of the things that we're doing a lot with clients today is helping them roadmap. Again, I think I mentioned this earlier. What cloud solutions are going to make the most sense for the organization? And by far, backup as a service or DR as a service is something that is always near the top of the list. So that's something that we work with clients on a pretty regular basis, helping them determine whether it makes sense to use their own data center. Envision recently launched their own cloud services as well, so this is part of that mix and option for them as well. So I think it's important for anyone who's looking at a cloud service provider to really take a step back, understand the business ramifications both from a pricing perspective and SLAs and the actual service that's being provided, even down to the contract level on it. So this is a very important and exciting part of the business for us too.
Absolutely, absolutely, and Zerto and Envision are hand in hand with offering that type of solution for the end user. So with that, once again, big takeaways from the Zerto piece here is that it is an enterprise class solution that is designed to be virtual, simple, and scalable. With that, again, thank you to Phil and the Envision team for inviting Zerto to participate, and thank you to everyone that joined for their time today. And at this time, we'll be happy to open it up to any questions, but also offer up any type of follow-ups, whether that be a more technical demonstration, one-on-one, where we can actually show you what the software can do, or provide you any type of follow-ups to have a more deeper conversation around.
So, on top of that, when we're talking to customers and clients and trying to help them figure out their DR strategy, I think it's important to understand that this is one piece of the pie. And the reason that clients are working with clients and they're working with Envision, quite frankly, is that there's going to be a virtual environment. There's typically going to be a physical environment. There may be a mainframe environment, and all those things got to be taken into account at the workload level and application level. So we are absolutely big fans of the Zerto solution, and again, to kind of echo your sentiments, if anyone is looking for a follow-up, whether it's a deeper discussion on any things we talked about, or maybe a demo to some extent, we can go ahead and do that. At this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them into the question window there. I am going to attempt to unmute folks. If I can't do that, if you could, again, just let me do this. Oh, there we go. I think the lines are open. So yeah, if there are any specific questions at this point, we'd love to address them for you. So we'll give you guys a couple minutes to ask those.
And while people are either gathering questions or digesting the information they saw, we'll be happy to send out everyone's contact information so that they can have that as well. And if there are any questions that come up after this, be happy to entertain them.
All right. At this time, I am not seeing or hearing any questions. So once again, on behalf of Zerto and Envision, I appreciate your time. Hopefully this has been valuable. And again, if you are an Envision customer today, please reach out to your account executive, salesperson, to schedule out some additional, either a meeting or demo if you're interested. If not, I also have my contact information here as well. And if you have any questions at all, we'd be more than happy to take care of that. But for now, again, thank you for your time, and have a great day. Thanks.